Aurora Webb stepped through the grand entrance of the wedding venue, her modest dress fluttering slightly in the warm spring breeze. The gown was a plain, faded blue cotton, none of the intricate lace or shimmering silk that filled the hall beyond the large glass doors. Her simple flats scuffed lightly on the marble floor as she paused, taking in the suffocating opulence that surrounded her. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light over polished gold-trimmed tables, each adorned with towering floral arrangements in shades of white and blush. The scent of fresh roses mingled with a subtle undertone of expensive perfume, carried by guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Aurora's heart fluttered with both excitement and nerves. She brushed a stray strand of wind-tousled hair behind her ear and allowed her gaze to drift over the scene before her. Gentle laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. It was an atmosphere she had admired from afar many times, but never before joined so personally. A few sharp glances cut through her periphery. Two women at a marble table exchanged whispers, glancing pointedly at her worn shoes and the threadbare edges of her purse. "Did you see her shoes?" one murmured. "She must be staff. No guest would show up like that." Laughter bubbled quietly beneath the conversation. At the nearby reception desk, a woman in a sleek cream suit with perfectly styled hair narrowed her eyes at Aurora. The wedding planner, clearly in control of this perfect event, observed her with thinly veiled suspicion, her gaze taking in the rumpled dress, the outdated bag clasped tightly in Aurora's hand, the straight but uneasy posture. The unspoken judgment hung heavily in the air. The wedding planner's sharp heels clicked purposefully as she approached Aurora, her polished demeanor radiating control. She stopped just inches away, folding her arms as if barricading the perfect event from this unexpected visitor. Her voice was cool but loaded with authority. "Can I help you? This area is for invited guests only." Aurora lifted her chin, forcing calm into her voice. "I'm here for the wedding. I'm part of the team helping with the decorations. I was told to arrive early to enjoy the setting and oversee the final touches." Her words hung in the air, tentative yet firm, hoping to bridge the gulf of disbelief in the woman's eyes. The planner's lips curled into a dismissive smirk. "I'm afraid there must be some mistake. We've double-checked the guest list and vendor pass. Your name isn't on any of them." She glanced pointedly at Aurora's attire, her eyes lingering briefly on the scuffed flats and the worn bag hanging over one shoulder. "Do you mind? This event is exclusive. People like you don't belong here." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the soft rustling of silk and the quiet hum of polite conversation. A few nearby guests stiffened as if sensing the tension, their eyes darting between Aurora and the planner. "Well, I'm not here to cause trouble," Aurora said carefully. "I was told to come by. Please, if you need, I can show you emails from the bride's team. I'm the designer for the floral arrangements and concepts." Her voice wavered slightly, but she forced herself not to back down. The planner waved a hand dismissively. "That sounds lovely, but this isn't the place for you to make your claims. Maybe you belong in the service areas, not mingling with guests in the main hall." Her words sliced through the air, harsh and public. The guests nearby snickered, the tension shifting into amusement at Aurora's expense. "Excuse me?" Aurora's voice rose, a flicker of disbelief flashing through her features. "I'm not staff, I'm a professional. Please don't embarrass me." "Oh, dear," the planner said, her tone dripping with condescension, "no one's embarrassed. You're simply out of your league." She tilted her head, a smile spreading like ice. "Why don't you wait outside until security can escort you off the premises?" A man in a sharp black suit appeared, advancing toward Aurora with firm steps. Aurora glanced around, eyes searching for an ally, a friendly face, anyone willing to intervene. Instead, she caught stifled laughter from a nearby table. One guest whispered, "I can't believe she's still standing there." Another filmed the scene discreetly on her phone, her finger hovering over the record button. Her cheeks burned with shame, but Aurora summoned the last of her strength to hold her ground. "Please, I'm just asking for decency," she said, her voice steady despite the tightening in her chest. The wedding planner's smile twisted. "Decency? You've had your moment. Let's end this before it becomes more uncomfortable for everyone." The man stepped closer. "Miss, you need to leave now." Aurora's body froze, the embarrassment and hurt swirling inside her like a storm. She swallowed hard, eyes misting, but refused to retreat without dignity. A hush fell over the crowd as security gently but firmly guided Aurora toward the exit. The laughter and whispers grew louder behind her. She glanced back, her gaze meeting the smirks and indifferent looks of the guests who had watched but offered no help. Outside, the air was cool and fresh, but it did little to soothe the ache inside her. She stood on the marble steps, the grand hall lights spilling out behind her, the sounds of celebration now distant. Her breaths came fast as she wrestled with humiliation and disbelief. How easily she had been dismissed, written off because she didn't wear the right dress or shoes. It wasn't just about the clothes, it was about being seen, or rather, unseen. Her hands clenched the worn strap of her bag as she scanned the ornate doorway one last time. The laughter, the sparkling dresses, the privileged smiles, too exclusive for someone like her. She felt small, though she knew her work and passion deserved a place here, deserved acknowledgement. No one had spoken up for her. No one had tried to stop it. The silence of the crowd, their quiet complicity, pressed down harder than any verbal insult. Aurora forced herself to breathe deeply, smoothing the wrinkles in her dress. She was more than the unpolished exterior they saw. She had created the vivid wedding vision that wowed social media and changed the trends. Yet, here she was, treated like an intruder. A soft voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Miss Webb?" An assistant in a crisp black uniform stepped up, holding a sealed envelope with her name elegantly inscribed across it in gold script. Aurora blinked, confused and wary, but took the envelope with trembling hands. Behind the assistant, a tall man in a dark suit stood quietly, his posture authoritative, a butler, perhaps. "Please, follow me," the assistant said gently. "There's been a message from the groom himself." Aurora's eyes widened. Slowly, she nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and uncertainty. The cold dismissal she had faced moments ago felt like a distant echo now. As she walked through the side door of the venue, the atmosphere inside shifted softly. Whispers followed her path, the guests watching as their earlier assumptions began to unravel. The groom's intervention was imminent, and with it, the reckoning of the evening's harshest judgment. Aurora braced herself, stepping into a story far larger than she had expected, one where the truth of who she was would finally shine through the shadows of doubt and disdain. The wedding planner retreated to her polished desk, smoothing the crisp silk scarf around her neck with a calculated motion. In the controlled confines of the brightly lit office behind the main hall, she replayed the scene in her mind, each detail sharpening her resolve. Raised in a world where appearances and pedigrees sat at the pinnacle of worth, she had long prided herself on upholding the elite aura of the events she curated. These events weren't just celebrations, they were carefully choreographed displays of status and exclusivity. Any disturbance, any imposter, any disruption like Aurora Webb threatened the sanctity of the carefully constructed image she worked so hard to maintain. To her, Aurora's shabby dress and uneven stride were more than just quirks of fashion, they symbolized a threat. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the wedding planner had acted not out of cruelty but a fierce devotion to preserving the standards entrusted to her. She believed she was defending the brand, the elegance, the ideals of the event. Indeed, she was certain that allowing even one person who didn't fit the image to linger would weaken the prestige of the night, the very thing that separated the exclusive few from the masses. Satisfied with her decisive response, the planner permitted herself a self-congratulatory smile. The laughter and chatting of the guests in the main hall filtered through the walls, and she allowed herself to believe the tension had dissolved, the incident swept away like an embarrassing ripple on an otherwise flawless pond. Her team had resumed their duties seamlessly, and the orchestra's gentle strings once again filled the room with soothing melodies. Everything was back to normal. Still, some part of her remained watchful through the mirrored windows between offices, observing the rotation of staff and guests. She noticed Aurora had slipped outside, the last she had seen of the plain woman in the blue dress. Outside, Aurora stood alone in the garden beneath a sweeping elm, her breaths shallow and irregular. She wrapped her arms tightly around her frame, trying to swallow the harsh sting of rejection. Up close, the garden was less refined than the hall, the soil underfoot soft, the branches tangled against the evening sky. Still, there was solace in the quiet away from the elevated laughter and clipped conversations inside. Her hands trembled ever so slightly as she unfolded the cream-colored envelope. The groom's name was embossed in elegant cursive, and beneath it, her own printed name. Curiosity wrestled with disbelief, each flicker of hope too fragile against the grief she carried. She hesitated only briefly before breaking the seal and pulling out the contents, a folded letter, formal and heartfelt. The groom's handwriting was neat and assured. Dear Miss Webb, your vision has transformed our wedding beyond anything I could have dreamed. Every detail reflects your creativity and passion. I wish to personally thank you, and I invite you to join us on stage as a guest of honor. Please come to the hall. My best, James Archer. With a steadying breath, Aurora folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. The invitation was unmistakable proof. She was not a trespasser but a vital part of the evening. Her heart pounded, stirring a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Moments later, the assistant in black reappeared, offering a polite nod. Shall we? As they walked side by side through a quiet corridor behind the main hall, murmurs began anew among the guests. The assistant's discreet nods to staff caused subtle shifts. A waiter halted to watch, couples leaned toward each other and whispered softly. The transformation of the atmosphere was tangible. The elegant bubble of scorn and superiority faltered, replaced by curiosity and a trembling undercurrent of guilt on some faces. Back in the main hall, the wedding planner remained seated at her desk, though unease crept into her composure. A glance at the entrance had revealed a small cluster gathering near the door, eyes fixed eagerly on the quiet passageway Aurora was making her way through. Suddenly, a sense of vulnerability breached the planner's carefully constructed armor. She felt exposed, forced to reckon with the cracks where her assumptions had shattered. Had she really known who Aurora was? Had her judgment been clouded by superficial views and prejudice? The questions unsettled her as much as the growing murmurs from the crowd. Aurora's steps quickened as she approached the stage where James Archer waited. The groom's expression was warm, his smile an invitation that melted away the sting of earlier exclusion. Everyone, James's vibrant voice rang through the hall as the music softened to silence. Please welcome Aurora Webb, the brilliant mind behind the design of this unforgettable evening. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cell phones popped into the air as guests scrambled to capture the moment. The harsh whispers previously directed at Aurora fell silent, replaced by tentative applause and wide-eyed surprise. Across the room, the wedding planner's jaw slackened, disbelief etched through her features. She stared as Aurora stepped forward, calm and dignified, her presence commanding without a word. Aurora's gaze swept the room, noting the sudden shift, the eyes that had dismissed her now asked silently for forgiveness. She held herself steady, neither succumbing to bitterness nor gloating over the reversal. This was more than gratitude or vindication. Aurora carried with her the quiet strength of someone who had lived by conviction, who had chosen humility and simplicity even as she meticulously transformed a lavish setting into her artistic vision. Her worn shoes grounded her, literal touch points to the determination that had guided her journey. Unlike the brittle glamour around her, her success was built on resilience, creativity, and an unshaken core of authenticity. As applause swelled, Aurora found herself surrounded by gentle smiles and respectful nods. Guests whispered excitedly, desperate to uncover her story, the woman behind the understated exterior who had crafted this spectacular dream. She allowed a small, serene smile to grace her lips, the kind born from quiet victory rather than loud triumph. Inside, the wedding planner sat frozen as the crowd's focus shifted decisively in Aurora's favor. The carefully maintained hierarchy of exclusivity that had underpinned the evening cracked wide open. What had been a minor disruption was now a profound recalibration of perception and respect. Aurora's story was rewritten not by spectacle or confrontation, but by presence and quiet grace, melting away the snobbery and revealing the person she truly was. Aurora stepped onto the stage, the gleam of crystal chandeliers reflecting softly off the floral masterpieces she had lovingly designed. The vast hall, usually framed by sparkling gowns and polished suits, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The groom, James Archer, stood regal and effortless at the podium, his eyes sparkling with genuine warmth as he reached for the microphone. "She's here," he announced simply but with undeniable pride, his gaze locking on Aurora. Aurora Webb, the creative force behind every blossom, every detail that you see in this room tonight. The words resonated through the hall like a bell, stirring a wave of disbelief that rippled over the crowd. Several guests gasped in unison, their eyes wide and mouths slightly agape. The polished phones in hands froze midair, caught in moments of surprised capture. The grandest atmosphere of arrogance, the self-assured whisperings of who belonged here, shattered like delicate glass. The wedding planner, who had moments earlier been so assured in her control, stood immobile near the back of the room. Her usual composed mask cracked, replaced by a pale, almost stunned expression. She watched Aurora stride forward, calm and poised despite her now plainly simple dress that contrasted severely with the haute couture around her. That dress, once a source of scorn, now seemed like a quiet emblem of authenticity amid the flash. Guests whispered feverishly. "She's the designer? The one responsible for this setup? I can't believe it." A woman nearby blinked rapidly, shifting her expensive clutch nervously as she murmured, "How could we have been so wrong?" Others shuffled awkwardly, glancing around, their earlier mocking smiles fading into guilt-lined eyes. A wealthy man who had openly joked moments before about Aurora's lost shoes now averted his gaze, discreetly muttering apologies to his companions. Several women who had been laughing at the fringe quickly dropped their phones and focused their attention elsewhere, hoping to escape the group's sudden change in dynamic. Aurora kept her composure. There was no triumph in her posture, no victorious smirk. Instead, there was quiet grace and a deepened strength that radiated naturally from within. Her eyes met James's, and she gave a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of the respect and trust between them. The applause began gently but grew steadily, swelling as more guests acknowledged the value of her contribution and, more importantly, her humanity. James stepped aside to the microphone and continued, "Aurora's vision wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about telling a story, capturing the essence of this day through simplicity, elegance, and heart. Her decision to wear what she's wearing tonight? That was a personal vow. She wanted to stay true to herself and let her work speak louder than her appearance. She flew straight in from her remote design studio only this morning, focusing on what mattered most to her, the craft, the connection, not the show. The room fell silent, absorbing both the weight and the wisdom in those words. Aurora's modest dress now seemed a symbol of integrity, a sharp contrast to the shallow snobbery that had earlier dominated the space. A subtle warmth spread through the guests as the story sank in. Here was someone who valued substance over glitter, commitment over superficiality. A designer who preferred the humble over the ostentatious, who met success with a grounded sense of self. Aurora's voice, calm and clear, finally stirred the crowd. "Thank you, James. It's been an honor to bring this celebration to life. But tonight isn't just about me, it's about the love we all share here and the beauty that comes from being genuine." Her words carried a quiet power. The guests listened, some wiping away a newly awakened tear, others nodding thoughtfully as the room filled with a warmth that transcended the earlier coldness. The wedding planner's gaze remained fixed on Aurora, fluctuating between disbelief and bitter regret. She understood now that her judgment had been short-sighted, her assumptions cruel. Yet even in this stark revelation, Aurora offered no rebuke, no confrontation, only an elegant presence that slowly transformed the room's energy. Members of the staff, previously an indistinct backdrop, now exchanged glances with renewed respect. A few discreet smiles appeared. Some timidly approached Aurora later to express personal admiration for both her work and her poise. The scene unfolded not as a spectacle of defeat but as a graceful shift, quiet yet profound. Aurora's success story wasn't born from flashy displays or scandalous drama but from steadfast dedication to her art and an unwavering commitment to authenticity. The guests' shifting perceptions exposed the fragile nature of the social hierarchy that had briefly tried to exclude her. What had seemed like unshakable walls of exclusivity crumbled quietly when faced with genuine talent and character. Some attendees, who had been quick to pass judgment based on outward appearances, now found themselves humbled by the contrast between Aurora's simple dress and the richness of her contribution to their evening. As the applause waned, Aurora descended the stage with quiet dignity. She moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations with genuine warmth, her smile never forced but full of the strength born from struggle overcome. James caught her arm gently, whispering, "You were perfect." She squeezed his hand, gratitude and relief mingling in her gaze. Later, when asked why she chose to dress so plainly on a night that glittered with luxury, Aurora offered an answer that resonated with many. "I've always believed that the clothes we wear should reflect who we are inside, not the image others expect of us. Dressing simply reminds me to stay connected to my purpose, to the love and creativity that guide me." Tonight was no different. Her words echoed in the quieter moments afterward, becoming a gentle mantra for those reflecting on the evening's unexpected turn. Among the crowd, the deeper truth was clear: Aurora Webb was more than the sum of appearances. She was a quiet force of authenticity and artistry who had transcended the shallow expectations imposed upon her. The contrast between her humble dress and the grandeur around her was not a weakness but a statement, a declaration of values that quietly but effectively changed the narrative of an entire room. The wedding planner, feeling the weight of her failing, retreated with a heavy heart, her previous air of superiority diminished, replaced by the uneasy stirring of an important personal lesson learned. In that moment, it became clear that true elegance was rooted not in exclusion, but in respect, humility, and the celebration of genuine brilliance wherever it may be found. Aurora's presence, calm, composed, and powerful, left an indelible mark on that glittering evening, forever altering the way the guests saw not only her but themselves and the very meaning of inclusion. The atmosphere in the grand hall had transformed completely, but James Archer's voice cut through the buzz as he raised his hand for silence. His usual warm smile now held a hard edge, a protective fierceness as he addressed the guests and turned directly toward the wedding planner, who stood near the back, shrinking under the sudden spotlight. "Let's be clear," James began, his tone firm and unmistakable. "This celebration is about love, respect, and honoring everyone who contributed to making this day unforgettable. Disparaging someone based on appearance or assumptions has no place here. The room quieted, eyes fixing on the planner, whose face had lost its confident glow, replaced by a pallid shock. Effective immediately, James continued, his gaze piercing, "We're putting the event on hold to address the behavior that occurred earlier. This treatment of Aurora was unacceptable, and I will not allow such conduct in my presence." The crowd responded immediately. A ripple of murmurs grew into murmurs of approval, some guests nodding vigorously, others whispering among themselves about how the planner's actions had marred what should have been a joyous occasion. The wedding planner's composure crumbled almost visibly. She tried to stammer an apology but was drowned out by the rising tide of disapproval. A few guests shook their heads, and whispers of "she's been fired," and, finally, "justice," circulated quickly. Within moments, a discreet message was passed to the planner. She had been relieved of her duties, effective immediately. The news seemed to spread like wildfire, tales of her elitism and unprofessionalism already online by the next morning, shared widely on social media with the name Aurora Webb attached as the symbol of standing up against prejudice. In the days that followed, the planner found herself facing public backlash. Not only was she out of a prestigious position, but invitations to speak or work within elite circles dissolved. To mitigate further personal damage, she enrolled in professional development courses focused on diversity and respect, aiming to understand the consequences of her actions and rebuild her reputation. Meanwhile, the wedding went on in earnest after the brief halt. Aurora, now fully embraced by the guests, moved through the room with an ease that belied the harsh introduction she had received just hours before. Her poise attracted admiration, a stark contrast to any lingering whispers of the past. A week later, the planner and Aurora unexpectedly crossed paths at a well-known design exhibition downtown. The event was crowded with creatives and industry insiders, and Aurora was there to unveil her latest project, a minimalistic floral installation that embodied her values of authenticity and subtle elegance. The planner's eyes widened as she spotted Aurora across the room. She approached hesitantly, the weight of previous events heavy in her posture. For a moment, the air between them was thick with unspoken words and awkward tension. Aurora turned to see her and offered a small, knowing smile, quiet and gentle, not gloating but perhaps carrying a touch of forgiveness. The planner nodded, almost imperceptibly, the gesture an acknowledgement of the lesson learned, of recognition that things could have been different. They did not speak much, a few polite exchanges acknowledged the past without reopening wounds. This brief encounter underscored the story of redemption, of growth on both sides. As Aurora walked away through the bustling crowd, heads turned and whispers followed. Not for her modest dress or simple shoes, but for the woman who carried herself with undeniable strength and grace, who had risen above insult and exclusion to claim the respect she always deserved. Her footsteps echoed softly on the polished floor, steady and assured. Around her, people watched in stunned silence, their perceptions forever changed by her presence. The evening's grandeur remained, but something deeper had shifted, a quiet revolution born not from spectacle or loud declarations but from the unshakable power of authenticity and dignity. Where once exclusivity reigned, a new awareness blossomed, inspired by the woman who dared to come as she was and stayed because she belonged. Aurora Webb's story became a quiet legend, an enduring reminder that true strength lies in resilience, and true beauty in the courage to remain oneself amidst the glitter of a world that often values only surface shine.